So every time I get ready to go speak, my dad will call me and kind of give me a pep talk. And this morning was no different. And so he calls me and he says, Mimi, I just want to remind you, you don't have to sound intelligent. You don't have to be funny. You just need to be yourself. I don't know if you have any family members like that in your life. He also, when I first told him that I was going to be a keynote speaker and I got my very first paid speaking engagement, he said, so let me get this straight. Somebody gave you money, like cash, like USD to speak? I said, yes, Daddy. He said, I'd pay you to shut up. So if you had been with me in my SUV, headed down the Lodge Freeway in good old Detroit, and if you don't speak Mimi, that's Detroit. When you're from Detroit, you have to sound fancy somehow. You would have heard me say to my then significant other, if you don't hurry up, we're gonna be late. I cannot miss the opening act. We were headed down the freeway to see the one, the only Bruno Mars. And as we made our way into Little Caesars Arena, I got cozy in my seat. Uptown Funk is what it is. I was like, ah, my jam. And maybe you have a jam. You have a song that excites you. You have a song that when you hear it, it takes you back to that moment. And music can do that for us. As Holly mentioned, I've been a DJ for well over 20 years. I started off in high school as the one and only DJ Flawless. And as you can imagine, that didn't go over flawlessly. I DJ'd my way through college. And what I found is music has a theme and a rhythm to it. And just like music can inspire and motivate you, you do the same thing as a leader. You have that song that's within all of us, that song that ignites us, that motivates us. And in the same way, you do that in the leadership role that you have. You would inspire, you motivate people, you get them pumped up to what their jam may be. So if you hear something today that resonates with you, I would love for you to shout it out. I'm on LinkedIn, motivational leadership speaker, on Instagram and Facebook, but I would love to hear if you have that nugget that really resonates with you that you want to share with others. And so I believe in everything that you do, you should set intention. And I do the same thing with my audiences. I set intention on what I want the experience to be like for you. And today is no different. And so the intention today is I want to hold you to your highest good. I want to give you tactical but practical tips that you can go back and use tomorrow. And my goal is really simple. Well, in music, there are really three components that pull it all together. And in the same way, this is the same thing that you do as a leader. First is the rhythm. And the rhythm is the beat that gets you going. And so I'll have you do it with me. Start clapping. Now we're going to double clap. We're going to triple clap. Not only are y'all talented, you're good looking too. But we all have that rhythm, and you create that rhythm for your team in the way that you communicate with them, in the way that you set vision. In the same way, you also create synergy. And synergy is all about collaboration, whether it's collaboration between your team, the people on your team, or it's collaboration between departments and organizations. One of your jobs is to create that synergy and that thread. And then lastly is harmony. How to create a harmonious experience where people are excited to show up, that they know that they're supported in their efforts and supported in the work they do. One of my former coworkers, Bart, reminded me of the importance of our first point today, which is playing from the same sheet music, as he was director over his choir. Now, he comes in as a director for a very special Sunday. It was the 50th anniversary of his pastor. They had done all the preparation to make the day spectacular. They had made sure that the program was done in a pristine way. They ensured that all of the volunteers had their roles and responsibilities, and they had the most important part, which is the food. Y'all know what I'm talking about. I don't know if Holly didn't mention this in my introduction, but I have a weight problem. I can't wait to eat. So whenever anybody mentions food, I'm all about it. So as Bart was getting ready to start the day off, as the leader of the choir, he was pulling together the sections just as they practiced. And there was one particular song, one hymnal that they knew that their pastor loved, and they practiced it till they couldn't get it wrong. And so as he began, he stands in the middle of the choir stand. He brings up this side, and they start to sing, and they bring in the words. He brings up this side, and they start to bring in the words, and then he pulls it together, and bam, it sounds like a cat in heat. It was terrible. I mean, bad. And as he's conducting the audience, he can't quite figure out what is going on. I mean, it's so bad that the pastor is sitting back in his seat trying to fan so that you don't see his face in disgust, like, yikes, this is rough. And so as Bart kind of wraps up quickly the hymnal that they were playing, he looks down at his sheet of music. He peeks over at the sheet of music for the folks in the choir, and he realizes they're playing the same song, but they're not on the same sheet music. See, what he found out later on was the assistant choir director had gotten new hymnals delivered and had replaced some of them in the pews, but not all of them. And so they were off. Were you there? You get it, right? She's like, I see how this works. And as they kind of shifted through the music, they were off by just a page. And so that's what the calamity was all about. Now you're probably wondering, what does this have to do with my leadership journey? Well, I'm so glad you asked. It's because sometimes even as leaders, our job is to set vision, is to give people direction, is to make sure they're playing from the same sheet music. But sometimes that direction changes, but we forget to tell people. We forget to give them the other sheet music. And they're looking at us as direction. They're just playing it kind of based on what they were told initially. And so I'll ask you as a leader, when you get ready to set vision for your team and direction, are you clear that you're playing from the same sheet music? Are you all on the same page? And sometimes it feels like you're repeating yourself over and over and over again, or that they should get it because I've talked about it once or twice. Do you know the average marketing research says that someone needs to hear something 5 to 7 times before it sticks? And speaking of sticking, it reminded me of my sister, Ashley. You see, Ashley and I used to sit together when we were about 5 and 6.5 in front of our 32-inch Panasonic TV on a swivel. We were cool because we just got a remote. But up to that point, I was my mother's remote. But anyway, so we're sitting in front of the TV and crisscross applesauce watching Sherry. You know her. She sung the song from Lamb Chop's Play Along. And at the end of the show, they would do their iconic song that I hated. My sister Ashley, on cue, would get up and go, this is the song that doesn't end. Yes, it goes on and on, my friends. Some people started singing it not knowing what it was. Hey, and they'll continue singing it forever just because this is the song. You get the point. She would follow me around the whole house singing this is a song that doesn't end. I might have hung her by her toenails. But it reminded me of you, of the importance as a leader to make sure that your chorus is repeatable. What makes that song, that iconic song, so important is it goes over and over and over again till it gets what? Stuck in your head. And in the same way, we have to make sure that the vision and the mission that you have for your organization, that sheet music that you have, is getting stuck in the heads of the people that you lead. Are you taking the time to make sure that it's repeatable? Do they know it well enough where they can say it verbatim? I know the direction that we're headed. They play into how you show up. And part of that is your attitude and excitement about the direction that you're headed as a team. You see, I like to call it contagious commitment and enthusiasm. One of our jobs as a leader is to make sure that we're admitting that contagious enthusiasm and commitment to our team. And sometimes it shows up in different ways. Like, I had a gentleman I was working with in one of my leadership development workshops. He was a mill manager or first line supervisor in a paper mill in Ogden, Utah. And Rob will say he was a little what I would call curmudgeonly at times. And his attitude wasn't always the greatest. And so he got a directive from management about a change they were going to make in their production line, a pretty significant change that would really operationally make a difference in how his team worked every day. And so he gets this directive and he's grumbling, oh, here's another change from management. And we'll talk about management in a moment. And he reads it really quickly. He pulls together a stand-up meeting for his team. And he says, hey, management in all of their glory has decided that we're going to do a new production unit here. And, I don't really know how this is all going to work, but we got to do it. There you go. Ask me questions. I might answer for you. Do you think his team bought in to the change? Not at all. It was to the point where they were so concerned that people started looking for a new job. They were really worried about the direction of the company and the security of the work they got to do, all because of the way that Rob delivered the message. They fed into his energy. When he went back later on and we were going through a coaching conversation, I just asked him, I said, Rob, when you delivered this message to your team, did you give them a little bit of hope? Did you paint a better picture for the direction you're headed? And here's the thing. I believe in transparency. I believe in giving people the real truth, but also it's how we paint that truth. It's called the hope slope. See, hope slope simply means that at any given time, we're kind of on the slope as employees. We just want to make sure it's getting a little bit better than what we're experiencing right now. And as a leader, that's what you get to paint for them, is that hope slope. Things are getting a little bit better in the work that we do. And you build that by having that contagious enthusiasm. You're sharing that actively with your team. Lady Gaga did this really well. So Lady Gaga, also, I like to call her Stephanie G, like we're friends or something. But Lady Gaga, the famed entertainer, who had hits like Just Dance, which is one of my jams. I might break out in song every now and then, y'all. But one of the things that makes her story so incredible is she started setting vision for where she was going in her career even before she made it there. There's an MTV interview where she's talking to the host and she's sharing with them, I would stand in front of Madison Square Garden and say, the music is within me. The music is within me. I am a master at this. I will be on this stage someday. And she believed it with every part of her with so much conviction that it spread it to her team. People who were kind of working with her part-time kind of invested. And as she made her trajectory up as a famed entertainer, they remember her vision. Does your team remember your vision? Do you have that contagious enthusiasm, commitment, and excitement that transforms them? And the question you often have, or the thing that you have to really think about, are what I call 4 fundamental vision questions. And these are the things that your team are going to ask, and you should be able to answer as you're delivering that vision, as you're creating that playbook that they have. And they are, the very first one is, where are we going? What are we working to achieve? Seems easy enough. But are you able to articulate the direction that you're headed? What are we looking to achieve? What are we going after? Number 2 is, how are we going to get there? They need a roadmap. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but just an example of where you're headed, or some steps on how we're going to achieve it and make it there. They're asking that question. The next is, how can I contribute? Where do I fit into this vision? What's my role? What do you need from me in order for us to be successful? And then lastly is, I like to call it WIIFM. We all tune into that radio station. What's in it for me? What do I get from it? And oftentimes I hear leaders say, well, I can't give you a raise, I can't give you more money. Interestingly enough, the research supports that all things being equal, meaning that I feel like I'm being properly compensated for the work I do based on my job description, that money doesn't fall number 1. Money typically falls 4 or 5. The number one thing typically is appreciation from my manager. Do I feel like you value the work that I do? Do you share that information with me? Do I feel like I'm respected, that I contribute to the team? And so you should be able to answer these questions for your team when you're setting out the vision of where you're headed. And they should be able to answer those for you. And part of that is what I call the hallway test. Dun, dun, dun. Was it dramatic enough? Should I try it again? The hallway test. Okay, we're going to try this again. I'm a little disappointed. Let's get a little bit more hype in your voice. The hallway test. I like y'all too. And the hallway test simply means that if I'm walking down the hallway of your organization, or virtually, if we're in Zoom or Teams world, and I asked one of your direct reports, people that work with you, even volunteers that may work with you, how do you contribute to the bottom line of the organization? What do you do to contribute to the team? They should be able to answer like that. And if they can't, that means you need to come back and do what I call remix. I need to remix the messaging to make sure they're clear on the work that they do, how that contributes to the bottom line. And what we know is people are more engaged when they're contributing to something that's bigger than them. But they have to be clear on what that is. What's that element that creates that spark of commitment? And you have it right within your hands. You see, the number one, or what I would like to say, the single thing you can do to boost your employee engagement is something I learned on an amazing trip to San Francisco, California. So imagine this. I'm on a Delta Airlines flight landing in San Francisco, California, and there seems to be a little bit of turbulence. The pilot gets over there and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a little bit of rough air." It probably was because my legs were shaking so much through excitement, because I was going to meet the one, the only Oprah Winfrey. As I made my way into the newly minted Chase Center, I was ready to plug into the Oprah Winfrey experience with 15,000 other people. Now, I don't know about you, I was 3 seats from the stage, 2 seats from the center aisle, and I was there with that one special someone, my mom. And because I value my life, I won't tell you what milestone birthday we were celebrating for her, but my dad had gifted it to her. Now, I was so mesmerized by Oprah that I was hoping like a little bit of her sweat would drain down on me and I would get the Oprah experience. Now, I know some of you are like, "Ooh, if I go to the gym and someone's sweat gets on me," but this is Oprah. Let it rain. And that day, Oprah said something to me that forever changed the way I looked at my influence and impact, and might also have you look at the influence and impact that you have as a leader when it comes to your employee engagement. She said, I've produced the Oprah Show for well over 25 years. I've interviewed 37,500 and something people from all walks of life. Heads of state like former President Barack Obama, spiritual leaders like the Dalai Lama, and famed celebrities like Beyonce, with no disrespect to you single ladies. And to a person, she said after every interview, they would lean in and ask, "How did I do? What do you think? How did that go?" And Oprah said that when she interviewed Beyonce, she said, "You're Beyonce, you tell me." But she also took that to mean that no matter your status or your stature in this world, that every single person wants to feel seen, heard, and acknowledged. Seen, heard, and acknowledged. And guess what? Here's the good news. You don't have to be a billion-dollar mogul like Oprah to make someone feel seen, to make them feel heard or acknowledged. You have the power right within your hands. And the people that you work with every day. You know, on average, we spend more time with our coworkers than we spend with our families. As a leader, you have that direct influence over them. And sometimes it's the small things. I often like to think about it in the way of connection. How can I connect with people on a deeper level? How can I make sure they feel like I really heard them, I'm present in the moment? And sometimes they're small things. Like Jared, for example. Jared was one of the guys in my leadership development workshop that we were in this 6-month program, so I would see them every month. And each month we would have a different topic. And so month number 2 was critical communication skills. And Jared came to me really concerned one day because he said, you know what, Mimi, I'm worried I'm losing my team. I'm so concerned. And if I don't get them back on track soon, I don't think we're going to hit our production numbers this year. I said, so, Jared, what's the one thing that you're going to focus on between now and when we come back from class in about a month? And as he kind of thought about it and milled the idea in his head, he said, you know what? I'm going to work on being present with them. And I had taught them presence is about being still in the moment and really hearing people. And I said, it's making sure that you look people optic stem to optic stem. Not in a creepy way, by the way. If you try this at home, 3 seconds is enough, 4 seconds it gets creepy. So Jared came back a month later and he said, I said, well, how did it go? And he said, it really is things are starting to turn around. And he said, I said, what do you think made the difference? He said, well, I literally turned it around. I turned my chair around. You did what? Well, what he failed to mention is when you walked into his office, you would see his backside. The way his computer and desk was oriented, when people would come in, he had to swivel his chair around to actually acknowledge him. And so because he was super busy, he might be on the phone, he might be typing on a computer. I don't know, by the way, why my keyboard is this high. The keyboard should be down. Okay, that's my own issue. But he was typing in his keyboard, and he said he never really took the time. People would say something, he'd say, yeah, I'll get back to you in a moment. So he turned his chair around, and he actually started making connections with people. More people started coming into his office. They set up time to hang out with him and connect with him, simply because he turned his chair around. He made them feel present. And part of making people feel present is also listening. Listening is the key to make people feel heard. And I know that sounds simple, but it's not always easy. We have a lot of things that are vying for our attention at any given day. The phone is ringing, Facebook is pinging, the microwave's going off with my burrito. Like, you got a lot happening in that moment. And so we're going to go through a little quiz to see how good your listening is, because I think it's a really important leadership skill. So I want you to imagine that you're the bus driver driving a school bus down the street. You start your route with 10 kids on the bus. You get to your first route, 3 kids get on the bus, 5 kids get off the bus. You get to your second route. This time, 2 kids get on the bus, no kids get off the bus. You get to your final route. This time, 5 kids get on the bus, 3 kids get off the bus. What color is the bus driver wearing? Gray? Black? Some of you might be saying, you didn't tell me what color the bus driver is wearing, Mimi. Or some of you are thinking, 10, that's the color. Go ahead and give me just give me a wink if that's you. I don't want to call you out. How many of you missed that you are the bus driver in that scenario? How many of you are willing to admit it in front of a group? No, I was just like you when I started. Why? Because you hear numbers, and what do we typically associate numbers with? Facts, something important, something we need to kind of take in. This might come back later. You think about 4th grade when you had math problems and you had to make sure that the train arrived at this time. It was going 60 miles an hour, so you might be going back to your 4th grade experience where you got a D-. Oh, that was just me. But on a serious note, you think about it, when we hear information, we start to take it in, because guess what? As leaders, we're really busy. So we're like, okay, let's get to the part where I get to help you out here. I'm listening, but I'm listening for what I think is important. Or I'm there to fill in the blank for you. Well, I want to encourage you, sometimes as leaders, we have our superhero capes out where we have to come in and save the day for everyone. Tuck your capes in. Be present in the moment. If you missed that you were the bus driver, you might have also missed important details in another conversation with your team. Have you ever been in an interaction with someone and you thought you knew where they were headed? You were filling in the blanks even before They stopped only to figure out that later you missed out on the most important part of the conversation. And so I want to encourage you to be present in the moment with people. Just like Oprah said, seen, heard, and acknowledged. And it doesn't take anything incredibly outgoing or this amazing feat to do it. Sometimes it's simply just listening and making people feel heard. One of the tools I use is paraphrasing. Paraphrasing simply is just playing back to what I thought you heard in my own words. What I heard you say was X, or this sounds challenging for you. Or you know what, I felt the same way too. I'm levelizing the emotion, the experience for you. I call it feel, felt, found. It's a way for you to illustrate empathy in the moment for people, especially if empathy isn't your strong suit. I know my former spouse, empathy was his thing, and he would often say, I know how you feel. And I'm like, stop it, I teach people this, turn it off. But it really does work. Feel means I'm normalizing the emotion. What I heard you say is this, or that sounds challenging. Empathy doesn't mean I agree or I disagree, it just simply means I'm acknowledging that you're allowed to feel that way. Felt is normalizing that emotion where, it's okay for you to have that emotion. Sounds like that was challenging. I felt the same way. I was just talking to Holly last week. She had a similar experience. And then is the found. This is giving them direction on what you recommend that they do next. Now, here's the thing. You don't get to the found until you really allow them to go through the feel and the felt part of the equation. As I know for a lot of people, we want to kind of get to the end, but it's the beginning and the middle that really is what resonates with people, that makes a difference in the interaction that you have. And so that's our first part of rocking your leadership. The first beat is ensuring that your team is playing from the same sheet music. Are they clear on the vision? Can they answer those 4 fundamental vision questions? Am I allowing them to be seen, heard, and acknowledged in the moment? Am I really listening to them and being present with them? The next part is igniting the song in other people. So I was an entry-level customer service rep and had just gotten an amazing promotion, so much so that it tripled my income in the course of about 2 or 3 years. This promotion was so prestigious that I was working with vice presidents and officers in this big Fortune 500 company. It was a lot of pressure on me, and I was what they call a performance excellence lead, which was responsible for saving the company money and working on projects that did that, using Lean Six Sigma. Now, my boss, Mark, was known to be a little bit of a pistol. He had made his way up in the organization. It wasn't always the most welcoming. I mean, he walked around with a grimace on his face. You kind of wonder what was going on with him. And you didn't want to talk to him before he got his liter of Mountain Dew every morning. That was not a good idea. But he, for the most part, was a decent boss, and he was away from me. I didn't get to see him a whole lot because he worked in another location. And then I get a phone call after the first about 6 or 7 months into the job on a Friday. Now, I don't know about you, but if you get a phone call to go see your boss on a Friday, that's not good. So I start thinking, do I have enough boxes to put all my things in? And let me just level set. I was doing a decent job. I wasn't the best employee at this role, but I really tried hard. But it was elements that I was decent at. But I was in a group of high performers, and they were performing a little bit higher than I was. And so because my role was so visible, I was really concerned, and I hadn't gotten any feedback from Mark on how I was doing. So I arrived to his office, which was 72 miles away. I had all my boxes ready in case I had to vacate. And as I sat down in Mark's office, I sat in his chair, and he said, "Mimi, I've been watching you." "You have?" "And I've been noticing things." "You have?" "And I just want to let you know." "Okay, Mark, before you say it, I got a husband and I got 3 cats to take care of. Can you at least give me a whole month before you fire me?" And he said, "Fire you?" I said, "Yeah, I haven't gotten much feedback. I know I could have done this, this, and this." And I went through the list, and he started to laugh at me. He said, "Well, Mimi, we both know you're not the greatest performance excellence leader. You're doing all right, but not maybe this isn't your jam, but what I have noticed is you are really talented at training. What I have observed is you have this way to connect with people and make the material really stick through analogies and metaphors, and you know how to pull people in. So I said, "You're not firing me?" He said, "No." He said, "You suck as a performance excellence lead." I'm not going to fire you. But what I've done is I've recognized your talent in training, and I've actually talked to the director of training, and I set up a call with her next week. I think it'll be a better role for you based on your talents. That moment forever changed my life. It's one of the reasons I'm standing in front of you today. Mark recognized the song that was within me. He recognized my talents. Even though it didn't fit in the role that I was in, I had a piece of it that he saw kind of sprout and bloom and blossom. But he saw that, he looked at it as a way to help me be a better version of myself. He ignited that song, that beat that was there for me. He did what I call recognize and cultivated my strengths. Now, I wasn't the most talented when it came to numbers and running spreadsheets, but I knew how to connect with people. I went on to have that conversation with the director of training, and I started to lead both first-line supervisor roles, mid-level leadership roles, and even worked with many of our executives, and I loved my job. All because Mark saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. He ignited that song. And so I'll ask you, when you think about the folks on your team, what are their talents? What are their strengths? Do you give them opportunities and assignments that highlight those? Now, we can't all go to a different role or a different job, but are there elements in their job where you can give them more of that because they love it and they're good at it? See, interestingly enough, strength-based research suggests that when people are working in their strength zones, they're 6 times more likely to be engaged at work. And it's really those effective leaders that really consider, what are those strengths? Actively asking people and giving them the opportunity to work through it. See, when you focus on their talents and their strengths, people are overall happier at work. What we also know is a 4-to-1 ratio. For every 4 people that are engaged in the work they do and being in strength-based work, they offset that one curmudgeon, that one person who's not very engaged, and helps bring over the overall engagement of the team. And we sometimes forget it's really easy things. Like, I had a coworker of mine, her name is Amy. And Amy was very talented in communication, not necessarily in the verbal side, but in the written side. And one day I was working on an email that had to go out to a broad range of people, about 300 folks in the organization. Now, detail, not my thing, and I know this. And so I said, let me reach out to Amy and see if she'll help me craft it and edit it. And then another part of me said, well, I don't know if I really want to bother her. But I said, you know what? If you don't ask, you don't get. So I shot her an email and I said, hey, Amy, will you help me edit this? I have a deadline of tomorrow. Within 14 minutes, Amy came back with so many red marks that it almost made me sad. I think she secretly was excited about doing it. But she said, Mimi, I'm super busy, but I'm happy to do it. Why? Because it was in her strength zone. It was one of her top 5 strengths. See, I'm a big fan of Strength Finders 2.0, and Donald Clifton, who was one of the founders of the happiness psychology movement, and also the research that went into that book, said we typically ask the wrong question. Instead of asking what's wrong with people, we need to ask what's right with people, because you're going to get more from folks when you focus in on what they're gifted and talented in than you are on their weaknesses. And so I want to illustrate this for you today. And in a moment, I'm going to ask you to stand up if when you hear or read this statement, if it applies to you. Once we go through that one, then you can take a seat, and I'll bring up another one. And if that one applies to you, I would like for you to stand as you are able. Now, you can wave if you're not able to stand or choose not to, but I just want to see kind of the mix of the room. So stand up if you always talk to people in grocery store elevators or on airplanes. Now, I want you to also notice that I just said stand. People are like, hey, you too, like high five. All right, you can go ahead and take your seat. Stand up if you always have a color-coordinated or have a color-coded or otherwise organized closet. Like you can see the floor of your closet. Now, some of y'all who are sitting are like, there's a floor in my closet. You can go ahead and take your seats. Stand up if you always make a list of things to do on the weekend and you follow it. Some people are like, I make a list, it doesn't mean it gets done. All right, you can go ahead and take your seats. Stand up if you always find someone to race while driving. You're like, I got my eye on you. You can go ahead and take your seat. You push the elevator button to remind it that you're there. Come on, I know I'm here. There's a camera here somewhere. You can take your seat. Stand up if you always seek a familiar face at a party. Wow. Stand up, or you can take your seat. Stand up if you always, or keep standing, if you determine the plot of a movie before it ends. And you can take your seat. Now, all of those are strengths. Now, according to Donald Clifton's research, there's 34 choreographed or organized into 4 different categories. And what he says is when you use your 5 strengths on a regular basis, you're overall happy and more engaged at work. Sometimes we take for granted our talents. Many times they were developed when we were, as my grandmother would say, knee-high to a bow-legged duck. Now, she was from South Carolina, so apparently there were some bow-legged ducks there. I don't know. But it begs the question, when you go back to your childhood, what did you love to do? What were you in flow with doing? For me, it won't surprise you that I had the Mimi Brown show. I had my own TV show at 5 years old. Okay, the microphone might have been my hairbrush, and my audience might have been my teddy bears, but my parents encouraged me to help cultivate my gift of gab. Are you doing that for your team? Are you giving them opportunities to cultivate their genius? I love the quote from Albert Einstein that said, if you have a fish and you're trying to get a fish to climb a tree, it'll believe its whole life that it's stupid. That's because it's not working within its genius zone. And so what's your genius zone? Where is the space when you know you're in it to win it? When you feel like you're in flow, when you feel like nothing can stop you, you're unstoppable in that space. What does that look like for people on your team? And I often like to ask people these engagement questions. And these are questions that you can ask to your team, but I'm also going to give you a set of questions that you're going to ask yourself. Number 1 is, how can I make you feel valued, appreciated, and respected? What are those things? What does that look like? Number 2 is, what parts of your job do you love? Number 3 is, what do you want to do more of in your role? And number 4 is, how can I support you in that journey? These are really great conversations to have during the performance review process or the development process, but they're just questions in general that you should check in with them on at least an annual basis. And it might surprise you the answer that you receive. And so your job is to help them figure out, well, how do I give them more of that work? How do I put them in a space where they feel valued, appreciated, and respected? One of my favorite books is by Paul White and Gary Chapman, and it's the 5 appreciation languages. It's akin to the book, if you've read that one, the 5 love languages by Gary Chapman, which he identifies the 5 ways that people like to be shown love or appreciated. Do you know how your team likes to be shown appreciation? Are you doing that on a regular basis? Now, here are some personal engagement questions you should ask yourself, because just as important as it is for you to develop your team, you have to develop your own leadership style. And I know you're doing that in your Leadership Academy work, but go back and ask yourself, what would make me feel more valued, appreciated, and respected? What parts of my job do I love? What do I want to do more of in my role, and who can help me get there? Is there a mentor? Is there a sponsor? Is there even someone who might be on my level who I can use as a mentor, who maybe has a skill set in a certain space that I don't? We're constantly growing and developing as people, and one of our jobs is, as a leader, is to mirror the behavior that we want to see in our teams. And so if you're working on your growth and development, are you doing the same thing for the people that work with you? This is a quick activity. You can take a photo of it, but these are questions that you can even do in a team meeting. These are called strength teams. When you get the best of me win, you can have them answer these questions. You can count on me too. What I need from you is, and you get the worst of me win. Great conversation starters with a team. And then fill in the blanks. I had some folks say I'm allowed to brainstorm ideas when I'm given time to think, when I have all the information I need. You can get the worst of me when decisions are made quickly or I'm not given time to research. You can count on me to be organized and keep us on task. And what I need from you is to challenge my ideas, help me with organizing my ideas, and pull me out of the past. If you ask these 4 questions during a team meeting as a way to just use it from an engagement standpoint, you will be amazed at the responses you get. And then you can adjust your approach. I really love what Jack Welch said. He said, before you are a leader, success is about growing yourself. When you become a leader, success is about growing others. Are you growing your team? Are you giving them the space and grace to be the best versions of themselves? So the last part of our journey, as we look at how to rock your leadership, so we've talked about playing from the same sheet music, igniting the song in other people, and now it's singing their praises. Al was a field leader in one of the largest utilities in the state of Michigan. He had been at the organization 15 years and had been passed along from supervisor to supervisor. His attitude was a little meh, and when people saw him down the hallway, they would go the other way. He had this grimace on his face, and he just was not very nice. He had this reputation to get his work done, but his attitude was really poor. And one of his last supervisors he received was Steve. And Steve had known about Al and heard about his attitude, so much so that other supervisors would find reasons not to get him in front of customers and not even find reasons to cross his path. And so Steve looks at Al one day, and he had a very candid conversation with him, and he says, Al, I'm a level set with you. You're not very liked here. I mean, to the point where that's why you've been passed along from supervisor to supervisor. From what I see, you do decent work, but your attitude really needs some adjustment. As my friend Desi would say, it needs a little CPR on his attitude. Steve went on to say, but look, because we're new and we're just getting to know each other, I'm going to wipe the slate clean. I'm going to give you a chance to really show me what you're made of. See, I really believe you can do more than what you're doing. I believe that you have actually an amazing customer service ability and attitude, but no one has given you the opportunity or space to showcase it. I even know that even watching your production numbers, you're the best of the best. I've seen you in action. You can diagnose a furnace like no one's business. You can fix an appliance like it was yesterday. I just don't think anyone has given you or pushed you enough to step up and show up. And so Al looks at him, yeah, whatever, man. In the course of the year that Steve and Al worked together, a miraculous change seemed to happen, so much so that other leaders started to notice. When Al would walk into work, he had a smile on his face. Instead of keeping him away from customers, they would find reasons to get him in front of customers to solve issues. When he would see people, he would wave, and his production numbers were impeccable. They were so impressive. He was doing the work of 4 to 5 people that his coworkers said, hey, Al, slow down, you're making us look bad, sir. And when you ask Steve, and people gave so much credit to Steve, they said, Steve, what did you do with Al? I mean, he had been this problem employee, had been here 15 years. We didn't think you could turn him around. What gives? And Steve simply said, I showed him how I wanted him. I treated him in the way that I wanted him to show up. I start setting the bar high enough for him that I wanted him to exceed my expectation. You see, everybody had set the bar so low that he didn't have anything to live up to. He was like, I'll just do the bare minimum. But when I start pushing him, I start singing him his greatness, I start singing his praises, it made the difference. Now, interestingly enough, if you ask Al will tell you, he just got out of my way and let me do my job. Now, Steve did a really great job of letting Al shine. He identified those strengths and talents that he had, and he did it in such a way where he caught him doing something good. He would go every week and identify, hey, Al, I noticed you had this really great interaction with this customer, or, you know what, you fixed that furnace in record time. Tell me more about what you did. It made all the difference in making Al feel appreciated, valued, and respected. You see, we often are taught to give people what I like to call feedback. Now, when I use the term feedback, what comes to mind for you? Negative, right? Well, Steve turned this around for Al. He would provide feedback in a positive way for him. He caught him doing something good. He identified the behavior and gave him more reasons to show up that way. It reminds me of my former spouse. I woke up one Saturday morning for the 10th time to his socks in the middle of the floor. Anybody married? Anybody been married? Anybody heard of marriage? All right, so we are on the same page. And so I walked into my coach's office, Kevin, and I said, if he has his socks on the floor one more time, they're going to have to commit me. Maybe you've been there before. You have something that irritates you. Well, Kevin, in all of his wise words, said, well, Mimi, maybe you're always seeing his socks on the floor because that's what you're focused on. What if you focused on something different? What would that look like? So he gave me a gratitude challenge. And for the next 14 days, I defined one thing every day that I could be grateful for around my spouse. Now, here were the rules. It had to be something different every day. And then I had to write it down and acknowledge the specific thing that he did that I was showing gratitude for. Some days it was, I'm so grateful you woke up this morning. Okay, that wasn't allowed. But I would find a reason. And so some days it was, thank you for taking the trash out. It really took the burden off me. Or, you know what, I really appreciate you unloading the dishwasher. Before you went to bed last night, it was great I didn't have to do it. Or better yet, it was, thank you so much for taking care of my parking ticket so that our insurance didn't go up. And the key was every day I would write it down and put it in a different place. Some days it was in his wallet, some days it was on his car, some days it was in his briefcase. Even it was around Valentine's Day, I sent him a heart-shaped pizza with a note of appreciation. And in that 14 days, his attitude started to shift. The way he showed up started to shift. But here's the thing, he wasn't doing anything different. It was the way that I was saying things because I started showing him appreciation for how I wanted him to show up. After day 16 or 17, he said, hey, babe, you don't write me those notes anymore. Because he noticed and he acknowledged it. So what does my, marital issues have to do with you and praising your team? Find reasons to give them praise in a positive way. When you give them those expectations and you give them examples of ways that you want them to show up, guess what? They can start showing up in that way. You're showing appreciation for it. Give them that positive reinforcement, just like Steve did with Al and just like I did with my former spouse. And so I really believe that what we did here today is important. We talked about how to create vision and play from the same sheet music, how to ignite the song in other people by identifying their strengths and utilizing them. We talked about praising people by praising the song in them. But the most important part is what you do when you leave here. And so I have a little bit of an assignment for you. as a result of today's session, I just want you to think through, based on the short time we spent today, what's the one thing I want to start doing that would help me rock out my leadership? What's one thing that I want to stop doing that would help me rock out my leadership? And then what's something I continue to do that maybe I'm already doing really well that I can rock it out? And I think if you have those 3 takeaways, then our time together was well spent. So I just started yoga not too long ago. And there's something called the tree pose. And because I'm in these heels, we won't fully demonstrate it, but the tree pose is where you come up and you learn how to isolate your abs and you pull up your leg and you get all extra zen. I still haven't found the zen yet part of yoga or hot yoga specifically. But the tree pose reminded me of this article I read that this is a baboa tree that's in Tanzania, Africa. And what they found is even when they cut the tree down, when they look at the circles of the tree trunk, the tree actually continues to still grow even after it's cut down. And I think it's a really important lesson for us as leaders is we should never stop growing. We should continue to challenge ourselves and grow. And I think by you being here today, it's a great step to showcase the power of growing in your role. If you would like a cheat sheet on any of the things we covered today, if you scan this QR code and put in the code, or enter the code in LEAD for lead, that will give you a really quick PDF that walks you through each of the 3 beats that we covered today and gives you a couple activities that you can do with your team so you can take it back and put it into action. I just want to thank Holly, who has been phenomenal to work with and for this opportunity. Also want to thank Desi, who's also been a strong advocate for me in this time together. And my name is Mimi Brown. Thank you.